The world is full of mysteries, stories of people who vanished without a trace, leaving behind nothing but questions. Despite endless investigations, some cases remain unsolved, haunting us to this day. From strange last words to eerie evidence, these are the top 5 mysterious disappearances that remain unsolved. Number 5. The vanishing of Flight MH370. Flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 12:41 a.m. local time, bound for Beijing, China. The aircraft was cruising at 35,000 feet with 227 passengers and 12 crew members on board. At 1:19 a.m., as the plane crossed into Vietnamese airspace, the cockpit transmitted its last words, "Good night, Malaysian 370. Just 2 minutes later, the aircraft's transponder, responsible for communicating with air traffic control, was turned off. MH370 then made an unexpected left turn, veering far off its scheduled route. Military radar tracked the plane flying westward over the Malay Peninsula before vanishing completely from all tracking systems. When MH370 failed to check in with air traffic control, an urgent search was launched. Initial efforts focused on the South China Sea, but new evidence shifted the search to the Indian Ocean. Investigators discovered that satellite pings from the aircraft suggested it continued flying for up to 7 hours after contact was lost. The final transmission placed it somewhere in the vast, remote southern Indian Ocean. Despite an international search effort involving dozens of countries, no wreckage was found for over a year. In July 2015, a piece of debris, known as a flaperon, washed up on Réunion Island, confirming that MH370 had indeed crashed. Over the next few years, additional parts were discovered along the coasts of Africa and nearby islands. But the main wreckage and the black box remain missing. One theory suggests that Captain deliberately crashed the plane. Some reports claim he had simulated a similar route on his home flight simulator. Was it a planned act of suicide? Or was it a tragic accident? While investigators did not find definitive evidence of foul play, some experts believe this remains the most plausible theory. Another theory suggests that MH370 suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure, such as a fire, electrical failure, or a sudden decompression that incapacitated the crew. In this scenario, the plane could have continued flying on autopilot until it ran out of fuel and crashed. Could MH370 have been hijacked? Some theorists point to the presence of 2 passengers with stolen passports, but authorities later ruled out their involvement. Others speculate that someone on board took control, either as an act of terrorism or to divert the aircraft for unknown reasons. However, no terrorist group ever claimed responsibility. Perhaps the most controversial theory suggests that MH370 was intercepted by a government, perhaps the US, China, or another nation, due to sensitive cargo or security threats. Some claim the plane was shot down and the evidence covered up. But without concrete proof, this remains purely speculative. After years of searching, the official investigation was suspended in 2018, with authorities concluding that the plane's fate remains unknown. However, private organizations and independent experts continue the hunt for answers. With advancements in ocean mapping technology, some believe we may one day locate the wreckage, and with it, the truth. Number 4. The disappearance of Amelia Earhart. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart, one of the most celebrated aviators of all time, vanished without a trace. Her disappearance remains one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. Amelia Earhart wasn't just any pilot. She was a record-breaking aviator, a trailblazer for women in aviation, and an inspiration for generations. Born in 1897, she took an early interest in flying and soon made history. In 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. She set numerous records, wrote books, and championed women's rights. But her most daring feat would be her attempt to circumnavigate the globe. Earhart's journey began on May 20th, 1937, in Oakland, California. Accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan, she planned to fly around the world in her twin-engine Lockheed Electra 10E. The journey went smoothly for over a month, covering 22,000 miles. But trouble arose as they neared one of their final stops, Howland Island, a tiny speck in the Pacific Ocean. On July 2nd, Earhart and Noonan were expected to land on Howland Island, where a U.S. Coast Guard ship, the Itasca, was waiting to guide them in. But something went terribly wrong. Earhart's last confirmed transmission was chilling. She said, "We are on the line 157-337. We are running low on fuel. We are circling," and then silence. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were never heard from again. The U.S. government launched the most extensive air and sea search in history at the time. But after weeks of searching, no trace of the plane or its crew was found. The most widely accepted theory suggests Earhart's plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific. Given the vast ocean, wreckage may have sunk beyond reach. A compelling theory by the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery suggests Earhart and Noonan landed on Nikumaroro, a deserted island. Skeletal remains, an old shoe, and an aluminum panel possibly from the Electra have been found there. Some believe Earhart was captured by the Japanese and taken to Saipan, where she allegedly died in captivity. A controversial photograph from the 1930s supposedly shows Earhart and Noonan in Japanese custody, but experts remain divided. A less likely but intriguing theory suggests Earhart survived, returned to the U.S. under an assumed name, and lived in secret. Though this claim lacks solid evidence, it has fueled speculation for decades. Number 3. The missing Sodder children. George and Jenny Sodder were a hard-working couple raising 10 children. George was an outspoken Italian immigrant, critical of Mussolini, which earned him enemies. But no one thought much of it until that fateful night. At around 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, a fire broke out in the Sodder home. Jenny and George, along with 4 of their children, managed to escape. But 5 of their kids, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were trapped upstairs. Or so it seemed. George tried to rescue them. He broke a window, cutting himself badly. He ran to grab his ladder. It was missing. He tried to start his truck to drive closer. It wouldn't start. He even attempted to get water from a nearby barrel. It was frozen solid. Every effort to save the children was mysteriously blocked. By the time the fire department arrived, 7 hours later, the house was reduced to ashes. But here's where things get really strange. There were no remains, no bones, no bodies, nothing. The official explanation? The fire burned so hot that it completely cremated the children. But experts disagreed. House fires don't reach high enough temperatures to completely destroy bones. Even the family's own stove still had intact items inside. A bus driver claimed to see people throwing balls of fire onto the Sodder property that night. Months later, the family found a strange object, a possible incendiary device, in their yard. And then more chilling clues. A woman claimed she saw the missing children watching the fire from a car. Another said she served them breakfast the next morning at a roadside diner. Even stranger, a photograph sent to the Sodders years later of a young man who resembled one of their sons. The Sodders had received strange threats before the fire. A visiting insurance salesman warned George his house would burn down and his children would be destroyed because of his political views. A local jury refused to investigate deeper. Even firefighters later admitted the chief had hidden a piece of evidence, a bone fragment, only to reveal it years later, and it turned out to belong to someone who hadn't even died in the fire. Despite these red flags, the case was eventually closed. But the Sodders never gave up. For decades, they searched, putting up billboards, hiring private detectives, even digging into mafia connections, all in hopes of finding their children. But answers never came. Some say they died in the fire. Some said they were kidnapped. Witness reports and the photographs suggest the children survived. Others say it was a cover-up. Some believe the fire was set intentionally to silence George. Did powerful people orchestrate a kidnapping, making it look like a tragedy? Jenny Sodder wore black every day for the rest of her life, mourning her lost children. George died still searching, and the remaining Sodder siblings never stopped wondering, were there brothers and sisters out there, somewhere? Nearly 80 years later, the fate of the Sodder children remains a mystery. Number 2. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse Mystery. The Flannan Isles are a group of remote, wind-battered islands in Scotland's Outer Hebrides. At the end of the 19th century, a lighthouse was built on the largest of these islands, Eilean Mor, to guide passing ships through treacherous waters. It was manned by 3 keepers at a time, who would work in rotating shifts. But something happened in December 1900 that turned routine duty into a ghost story for the ages. On December 15, 1900, a passing ship, the SS Archtor, noted that the lighthouse beacon was mysteriously dark. Concerned, they reported the anomaly, but due to rough seas, no immediate action was taken. It wasn't until December 26 that relief keeper Joseph Moore finally arrived to investigate, only to be met with an eerie scene. As Moore climbed the rocky path to the lighthouse, he expected to be greeted by his fellow keepers, James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Instead, there was nothing but an ominous silence. The door to the lighthouse was locked from the outside. Inside, everything seemed strangely undisturbed, except for the absence of its keepers. The kitchen table was set, a chair was knocked over, and the clock had stopped. But no sign of Duckett, Marshall, or MacArthur. The official logbook offered the first cryptic clues. Entries from December 12th and 13th detailed fear storms, unusual behavior from MacArthur, described as agitated and crying, and notes about how the 3 men were praying together, despite being experienced keepers. But here's the twist. No storms were recorded in the area during that time. The weather was calm. So what were they so afraid of? Several theories attempt to explain the disappearance. The most accepted theory is that a massive rogue wave swept the men into the sea. Signs of storm damage near the lighthouse suggest that they may have gone out to secure equipment and were caught off guard by a sudden wave. However, this theory doesn't fully explain why one of them left without his oilskins, or why seasoned keepers would all leave the lighthouse unguarded. Then there are the more mysterious explanations. Some believe the men were victims of supernatural forces, perhaps the spirits of ancient island dwellers, angry at the lighthouse's presence. Others suggest they were abducted by a sea monster, or even taken by unknown forces. And of course, there are whispers of madness and murder. Could one of the keepers have turned on the others in a fit of isolation-induced paranoia? Modern studies lean toward a natural explanation, likely an unfortunate accident caused by the violent and unpredictable weather of the region. But the lack of definitive evidence keeps this mystery alive over a century later. The Flannan Isles remain uninhabited, their lighthouse now automated, standing as a lonely sentinel over a mystery that refuses to be solved. It all started on November 24, 1971, when a man, using the alias D.B. Cooper, boarded a Boeing 727 in Portland, Oregon. He was dressed in a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase, and he looked like just another businessman on a flight to Seattle. Nothing about him stood out, but as we soon discovered, Cooper was anything but ordinary. Once in the air, he handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she ignored him, thinking it was just another love letter or business card. But when she glanced at the note, she realized it wasn't anything like that. It simply read, "I have a bomb. I want $200,000 in cash, for parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. You have until we land to comply." Now, at this point, the flight attendants immediately took the note to the pilot. The plane was in the air, somewhere over the mountains of the Pacific Northwest, and it was clear D.B. Cooper wasn't joking around. He was prepared to make a serious demand. As the crew worked to notify authorities, Cooper remained calm and collected. The authorities were quickly alerted, and the plane was rerouted to Seattle. The FBI was on high alert. They began coordinating the drop of the ransom money and parachutes, while Cooper continued to reassure the crew and passengers that everything would go smoothly if they complied. It was like something straight out of a Hollywood movie. By the time the plane landed in Seattle, Cooper's demands had been met. He received $200,000 in cash. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $1.3 million today. He also got the parachutes he requested, along with a few other provisions. But here's where the story takes a strange turn. After the ransom was handed over, Cooper released the 36 passengers, allowing them to exit the plane in Seattle. But Cooper wasn't done yet. He instructed the remaining crew members to fly the plane to Mexico City at a low altitude, with the rear stairwell open. At some point, somewhere over the dense forests of Washington state, D.B. Cooper jumped. With the money in a duffel bag and 2 parachutes in hand, he leapt from the rear of the plane into the dark, rainy night. He was never seen again. Now, the strange thing about this whole case is the fact that Cooper just vanished. Despite an extensive manhunt and search efforts spanning years, no trace of him was ever found. No body, no parachute, no sign of where he landed or what happened to him. After the jump, authorities scoured the forests for any sign of Cooper. They found some evidence. A small piece of the ransom money, decaying in the woods near the Columbia River in 1980. But there was no solid proof of what happened to Cooper. There are many theories about what happened to Cooper after his leap. Some believe he perished in the forest, unable to survive the harsh conditions. Others think he was picked up by an accomplice, and he vanished into the night, never to be heard from again. There's even a theory that Cooper may have been someone with military or skydiving experience, given his calm demeanor and the precision of the jump. But here's where things get even stranger. Over the years, the FBI has followed countless leads, and hundreds of people have claimed to know who D.B. Cooper was. These disappearances leave us with more questions than answers. Each case is a puzzle with missing pieces that may never be found. What do you think happened in these mysterious cases? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling mysteries. Until next time, stay curious.